The sun has vastly more complex patterns of electrical activity than our brains. So why shouldn't that be associated with consciousness? Why shouldn't the sun have a mind? And if the sun has a mind, why not all the stars? If all the stars have minds, what about a huge collection of stars like the galaxy, linked up by vast plasma currents of electricity surging through the arms of galaxies, linking together all the parts of it?
Each one truly conscious, not metaphor, but real?
Real, but with its own kind of consciousness. Human consciousness is different from dog consciousness. It's hard for us to imagine other forms of consciousness. Our ability to understand these things may be limited, but to say that they don't exist is an even greater limitation.
I think that this approach where I'm saying reality is this vast network of interacting conscious agents and it's not space and time. It does break down a barrier that has been there between science and religion in terms of things that people in religious fields have been talking about. I'm saying we could actually get mathematically rigorous models of what we mean by consciousnesses. Even it turns out in this theory, when conscious agents interact, they create new, more complicated consciousnesses. And so you can take very simple consciousnesses, have them interact, and mathematically new, more complicated consciousnesses emerge, and this can go up to infinity. That means I have a mathematical model in which I can actually talk with precision about infinite conscious agents. When we're talking about infinite consciousnesses, now we're talking about the kinds of things that some spiritual traditions are interested in, but for the first time, I can actually have mathematical precision on this. So what I would
infinite consciousness. I mean, another word for God, right?
For in some traditions that would be, but I can now have theorems and proofs.
All right, Shalom. There's the brother Nahoya from the GMS Orlando camp. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yashar Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, to the Akwad, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the name of the one they ignorantly call God. Yahweh Shai is the name of the one they ignorantly call Jesus. Bahashem is in the name, Rakah is spirit, Kodash is holy, Akyam is brothers, Akwad is sisters, Shalom means peace, and Yashar Allah is Israel in the ancient Paleo-Hebrew. All right, I want to go into a lesson based on the clips you just saw. I'm going to start with this. This is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 13 and verse 1. And it reads, surely vain are all men by nature who are ignorant of Yahweh Hashem Shai, and could not out of the good things that are seen know him that is. Neither by considering the works did they acknowledge the workmaster, but deemed either fire or wind, or the swift air, or the circle of the stars, or the violent water, or the lights of heaven to be the gods which govern the world, with whose beauty, if they being delighted, took them to be gods, let them know how much better the Lord of them is, for the first author of beauty hath created them. All right, and one of those two clips is from a guy named Rupert Sheldrake. All right, and he deals with consciousness and, panpsychism, which is a fancy term for saying basically consciousness is the beginning of creation. All right, and all of these are a roundabout way of trying to get around the Heavenly Father and explain the nature of reality. All right, now Rupert Sheldrake, when you look into some of his interviews, he will tell you that he believes in God, which is the ground of all consciousness or the source of all consciousness. All right, and then the other clip was of Donald Hoffman. All right, I believe it's Daniel or Donald Hoffman. And he discusses how mathematically he has seen through mathematics that, there can be an infinite consciousness. There's the ability to have an infinite consciousness, which is basically saying in a roundabout way, the existence of God. The Lord talks about being the source of all being. All right, now I'll go here real quick. This is Job 34 and verse 14. If he set his heart upon man, if he gather unto himself his spirit and his breath, all flesh shall perish together, and man shall turn again unto dust. All right, and that goes in. Think about this, right? Thousands of years before the discoveries of modern science, the Lord basically explained these type of concepts in a way where we could understand it. We didn't have to use fancy words like panpsychism and consciousness and different fancy $10 words to explain the nature of reality. The Lord had already gave us the blueprint. He had already given us the nature of reality and the understanding of the nature of reality. All right. But, it's beautiful. It's a circular moment, if you will, because everything goes back to the Lord. As far as they reached into science to try to prove the non-existence of God, they ended up proving even more his own existence. All right. Now, let me go back to Wisdom of Solomon 13. All right. Because one of the statements, that Rupert Sheldrake made is that, the mind, the universe itself could have a level of consciousness, and everything comes from the spirit of the Heavenly Father. So to a certain degree, everything has a level of consciousness. When you think about Apostle Rakah talking about the car as having the spirit and, being ridiculed by Israelites, but it's true. Everything has a level of consciousness. Everything has a level of being, and it all comes from the source. This is why the Lord said man and beast should perish if he took his spirit back, which shows you that everything descends from the spirit of the Heavenly Father. Even when you think about the Lord's name, he first explained his name by saying, I am that I am. He is the existence. He is existence. Everything goes back to the source. Everything begins with the Lord giving you a spirit, giving you energy. And that's why the Lord said, I am that I am. I exist. And through the Lord existence, we all have our being. Lord willing, we be a part of that number concerning the elect. But all creatures, man, beast, plants, animals, planets, galaxies, all have their being in the Lord. And it's hard to comprehend because we can't comprehend the size of our own planet, let alone the universe. And these scientists spend their entire life looking into the creation of the Lord, only to find out that the God that they denied is evident in their research. And it's beautiful because the Lord didn't allow us to go and study the oceans for 60 years or study the rhinoceros for 40 years or 30 years to come to this conclusion. The Lord gave us the gift of faith to believe on him without these studies and without these sciences and without these scientists. All right. Going back to Wisdom of Solomon 13 in verse 3, it says, with whose beauty, if they being delighted, took them to be gods, let them know how much better the Lord of them is, for the first author of beauty hath created them. But if they were astonished at their power and virtue, let them understand by them how much mightier he is that made them. For by the greatness and beauty of the creatures, proportionably the maker of them is seen. And you think about that, right? In terms of the universe, incomprehensible. Even when they talk about the universe at large, they only talk about what they can see because there's a certain point that they can't see past. And I talk about this oftentimes, the observable universe. When you type that into Google, they'll show you a picture. And then when you look at the picture, it's almost a circle. It is a circle. Outside of that circle is the point that they can't see past. But even within that circle, there are billions of galaxies, and within that, planets alike. And this is inconceivable. This is hard to fathom and wrap your mind around, just being in these bodies. And with the little information we've been exposed to, all right, it's hard to comprehend. And the scriptures are saying the Lord is far greater and more far out than the creation. It's like if you did a drawing, your drawing is a aspect of you. It doesn't give the full scope. It's a window into who you are when you make a painting. This is creation compared to the Lord. Yahweh Shemel Shah didn't put up his full strength when he made creation. All right. Creation was made out of the pleasure of the Lord. All right. Matter of fact, this is Revelation 4:11. Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. So out of the Lord's infinite consciousness, out of his pleasure, he made creation. He made the universe. He made life, principalities. All right. All things were made by Yahweh Shai, which is his only begotten son, the only spirit created by the Father himself. And through his only begotten Son, he created everything that we see around us. And it all comes from his spirit. That's why when you see a guy like Rupert Sheldrake talk about the consciousness of the sun and the possibility of the universe having a conscious mind, it's not far-fetched when you know that all things descend from the infinite consciousness, which is Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. You know, and the beauty of the Lord is that he didn't have to make this complicated. You know, Esau likes to make this complicated to make himself seem smarter than the average person. But the genius is making things simple, and that's what the Lord did. It's not that the scriptures are a fable. It's so simple that people have a hard time wrapping their minds around it being the truth because they're used to receiving that information in a complicated format. And this is why through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, we're blessed to have what we have because the Lord made it simple for us to understand. He didn't overcomplicate his understanding. You know, he gave it to us in a way that we can digest it. And you know what? Let me go here before I go back to Wisdom of Solomon 13. Because ultimately what the Lord did was he determined that no matter what people search out concerning oceans, concerning the universe, concerning how life works, no matter what people search out, the Lord has determined that the only way you'll have access to him is through faith. All right. And I'm going to get that. I'm going to show you why I say that through the Spirit. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 1. And 21, but I'm going to read this in the NLT. So 1 Corinthians 1 and 21 in the NLT. It says, since God in his wisdom saw to it that the world would never know him through human wisdom, he has used our foolish preaching to save those who believe. Think about the power of that message. The Lord said that he has determined he will not let human wisdom give access to him. And this is why science can kind of point to the Lord, but ultimately it requires faith to truly believe in Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. It requires that. And that's why the Lord is pleased with the foolishness of preaching, because what people have deemed as foolishness is the actual truth. And what people have accepted as truth is cunningly devised fables. And that is there's a poetic nature to that in itself. You know, I often think about that through the Spirit, how poetic that is, that men who are deemed and perceived to be unlearned and uneducated are proclaiming the truth on the highways and hedges of every major city and are being mocked and scoffed at, while people who have cunningly devised fables are able to sell lies for infinite sums of money. And it's beautiful through the Spirit, because we can look at a guy like Rupert Sheldrake, you know, Donald Hoffman, as they try to grope in the darkness. They're trying to find the Lord through science. They're trying to find the Lord through their field of study, whereas the Lord has allowed us to see him without it. You know, we didn't have to go through the trouble of getting a PhD and a master's and all of these different accolades that these men have obtained on this side of life to understand the end goal and who the Heavenly Father is, while these men search it out. And I wanted to point out these two clips in particular because, again, these are things that we know to be true through the Spirit according to faith. But even in science, they're getting closer and closer to the realization that there is a spirit that governs all things. There is a power that rules in the kingdom of men, that everyone's spirit comes from a source, whether people receive that or not. All right, it matters not to the Lord. The Lord is not looking for an approval rating. He is. All right. And that's the beauty of the Lord's name, Yahweh. He exists. You can make mockery, you can scoff, but you can't make the truth not the truth. And this is the beauty of it. In the end, it shall speak and not lie. Now I want to continue. All right, I'm going to go back to Wisdom of Solomon 13. Because Wisdom of Solomon 13 really points to these so-called scientists. You know, it kind of speaks to them, you know, and their endless search for the Heavenly Father in places where he can be seen concerning his creation, but they still miss the mark. All right, this is Wisdom of Solomon 13 and 5. It says, for by the greatness and beauty of the creatures proportionably the maker of them is seen. But yet for this they are the less to be blamed, for they peradventure err, seeking God and desirous to find him. For being conversant in his works, they search him diligently, and believe their sight, because the things are beautiful that are seen. Howbeit, neither are they to be pardoned. For if they were able to know so much that they could aim at the world, how did they not sooner find out the Lord thereof? So the Lord is saying, y'all did all of this searching. You dedicated your entire life to one field of my creation, and you still didn't find me. You know, and he said they will not be pardoned for this. And why not? Because the warning has went out. You know, the true understanding of the Heavenly Father has been presented, and men have counted it foolishness instead of light. And I love watching clips like this because, again, through the Spirit, it kind of points to, well, it does point to the Heavenly Father, but you get an opportunity to see people search, you know, without the ice off. You know, one of the curses the Lord gave us was that we would grope in noonday. And that was parabolic to say that it would be hard for us to find truth. It will be hard for us to find answers. And this is why people change doctrines and philosophies every 10 to 20 years, because we were groping in noonday. And this is why when you look at these scientists, they're doing the same thing. It's just they're doing the same thing with schools of thought, with institutions of thought. You know, whether it's mathematics or it's the field of biology, they're still looking for the Lord. They just can't find him. And the beauty of it is that without having to go through those studies and without having to invest years in a particular field of study, the Lord has revealed himself unto us. All right, so Lord willing, this was edifying. With that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Wakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who will believe in this word, and all truth and its sincerity. Shalom.